All right, I hope you can forgive me. I've been working all day on a script for this video. I really want it to be a not negative piece. I can't write a script. I'm just going to look at you. We're just going to talk. Let's just have a conversation. What I want to do is I want to put on a little bit of relaxing music. What you're going to hear in the background is the newest track from PGN Music. This is Lazy Spring Afternoons. It's up there in the right-hand corner if you like what you hear. So instead of making a negative piece about Helldivers 2, I want to talk about what can we learn, because there is a lot that we can learn from this fiasco. And I choose the word fiasco very carefully because I don't want to say negative things, but I'm absolutely not going to say positive things just for the sake of being positive. I think there's a lot that we can learn here, and we need to just break it down. Now, taking nothing away from Arrowhead Studios, taking nothing away from Sony, they had an amazing launch. Helldivers 2 broke all sorts of records. They had records in pre-sales, records on launch day playing, but as you can see, Helldivers 2 suffers from the same problem that all games do, and that is a gradual reduction of average players playing at any given time. Now, it is very difficult to do analysis because we're missing one key thing. We're missing unique players playing for the day, but if we take the data we do have, Helldivers 2 is holding on strong, but you see that 458 all-time peak falls to 437, 333, and then we see the average players dropping from 274,000 to 217 to 142. Now, that doesn't mean total unique players that played that day. That just means the average players at any given data point in time. They had an amazing launch. I saw nothing but good things. Lots of people wanted me to come play the game. I just never got around to it. But what we have is a lack of honesty. And I think this is the first place that game companies should learn that gaming needs to get back to like the late 90s, where there's a much better relationship between the producer, that is the developer, and the consumer, which is the gamer. Unlike a lot of other industries, your game is going to rise and fall. Even very popular games like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV, we can even add Elder Scrolls in there. There is a peak when there is a new expansion, and then there is a population fall off in between expansions, in between DLCs, downloadable content, and that peaks and valleys. Now, WoW and Final Fantasy XIV have remained very strong. Lots of other MMOs have fallen by the wayside. That is because some companies are more honest, or they can get away with being less honest because of other things. The sunk cost fallacy, lifelong players, 20 years on WoW, you've been playing for 2 decades of your life. Of course, you're going to stick with it. I think the big problem that erupted was the community management. And I am no stranger to having problems with community managers. I think a lot of times community managers are either company men and they're saying pre-scripted lines that they may not believe, or they just act with a certain level of arrogance and like, I can't be wrong. And Helldivers suffered from that. And I don't have anything particular against Spitz, but I do, as an outsider with no dog in the fight, I saw this and it said, this is not the first or even the 14th mainstream game to require a third-party account that takes a couple of minutes to create. And you're absolutely right. Final Fantasy XIV, if you click out in Steam, it'll still take you to their launcher. ESO's the same way. EVE Online is the same way. But people knew that going in. Now, not everybody wants to play a game where there's a third-party account. And to be honest, looking through everything, I don't think it was very well publicized. In fact, a little later in the video, you're going to see a really important person who agrees with the idea that making that third-party account wasn't publicized. Now, I think where everything kind of exploded is right here. Then forget about it, change your Steam review, and make your displeasure known on a platform where it matters. Now, I have to ask a question, and the question is, why would an official Discord not matter? That is your platform that allows you to have open, honest, meaningful communication between the developers, through the community managers, or directly themselves with the player base. It also allows you to field complaints and receive feedback in a private setting without it being on a Steam review. Now, I understand that Spitz probably was upset, was angry, was emotional. In fact, in a couple of pictures, he's going to admit as much. But I think community managers have to be held to a higher standard. There is a thing called walk away from your keyboard. It's not a trait that I have, but it's a trait that a community manager should have. If the community is making you angry, walk off and get a cup of coffee. If a member of the community is making you angry, just simply don't engage with them. But don't say stuff like, go review bomb the game, because that's exactly, in this case, what happened. Now, a little while later, Spitz makes a couple of posts, and people have said, this was an apology. And sure, this looks like an apology, but the truth is it really isn't. And I think that's another part of honesty. There have been a number of different game companies, and I'm not going to name and shame because I want to keep this positive, where they've made things that look like the mea culpa, but they haven't ever said, I'm sorry. Now, if Spitz has literally said, I'm sorry for my behavior, please let me know. I have not been able to find something that says that. He does say, and that's on me, but there is a big difference between saying that's on me and I am sorry. But, you know, there are good ways and bad ways to express discontent. And coming after the devs and moderators in here isn't the solution and won't get this decision changed. Okay, well then again, I'm going to ask, why do you have an official Discord? Because I think that showing Sony, your distributor, that, hey, Sony, why aren't you in our Discord? If you're our distributor, why do you not have representatives in our Discord so you can see the discontent? Now, going after the devs and the moderators, that's exactly what a public forum is. If it's, let's see, it's the 7th of May right now, and there are a lot of people going after Bob Iger directly because he's the CEO of Disney and they just had a 9% stock drop. Does he make every decision? No. Does he control everything? No, but he is where the buck stops. The developer is where the buck stops when it comes to the development of a game. If you have discontent towards the game, share it. I don't know why a community manager would say coming after the devs and moderators in here isn't the solution. Sure it is. Then you can show Sony, hey, this decision is causing backlash. But what I don't like is when people use like excuses. It sucks. I'm not trying to attack anyone for being displeased with the change. Except that's exactly what you did. Eternal Swede said, this will kill Helldivers 2 on Steam. Backpedal or lose your player base. I thought you were refunding and leaving. So you did try to attack someone. I understand Spitz was angry. I've been there. I'm there all the time. I live in angry. But I do apologize when I hurt somebody's feelings or when I go completely postal. But what I really don't like is the very bottom, where it says, I'm just trying to protect my team from the backlash, so I jumped on the grenade. I'm sorry, man. That's not what you did. You didn't jump on the grenade and take the blame, like put everybody behind you and pop Sentinel and say, this is all my fault. I will bear the brunt of this. You lashed out at people. And this is the what can we learn from this? We can learn that we can't have that. Community managers are the punching bag. I'm sorry. You are the customer service representative. You are the person who picks up the phone on the 1-800 line, the helpline. You are that person. At the same time, do gamers sometimes go too far? Absolutely. Are they the customer? Yes. Are you going to say the customer's always right? That's not the quote. The customer is always right about what they want to buy. People wanted to buy a game on Steam. They did not want to buy a game that they had to have a PlayStation Network account for. Now, interestingly enough, Spitz does kind of say, somebody says, oh God, I thought you were fired. He said, almost, not quite. Turns out that telling people to review bomb and refund a game isn't a popular decision with the publisher. But I'm still here and I'm glad that we all made a difference. Man, again, I don't have a dog in this fight, but Spitz is kind of like, oh yeah, everything's good, kumbaya. No, it should have been, I'm glad you all were able to make a difference. On a side note, this is exactly why I think developers need to have a good working relationship with at least a handful of content creators, because that's something that the lead community manager could have like reached out to content creators and said, you know, I can't recommend people review bomb the game, but I can recommend that people leave honest feedback. So if you're honestly upset, leave that feedback. If you don't like this change, leave that feedback. I think that would have been the better route to go. And we're going to talk about the relationship between publishers and developers in a little bit. But obviously, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And what Spitz did was energize the movement. As you can see, 216,000 reviews, 200,000 of them were negative in a 3-day span. So that definitely got things moving. It energized the war machine. And it is that made the change. Now, interestingly enough, this is the CEO of Arrowhead and the Helldivers 2 creative director. Forging bonds of friendship through games. A game for everyone is a game for no one. I kind of like that quote. But this is why he's the CEO. I do have a part to play. I am not blameless in all of this. It was my decision to disable account linking at launch so that players could play the game. I did not ensure players were aware of the requirement, and we didn't talk about it enough. We knew for about 6 months before launch that it would be mandatory for online PlayStation titles. That I say bravo to. That is enough for me to say, okay, a CEO that does the mea culpa, there's no I'm sorry here, but I am not blameless, so I'm taking blame. And he says, we knew for 6 months. Okay. Due to technical issues at the launch of Helldivers 2, we allowed the linking requirements for Steam accounts to the PlayStation Network account to be temporarily optional, the publisher wrote. That grace period will now expire. See details below in the post. I can't show the post because it's all lined out now because they've reversed it. But I want to go back to the other part. We knew for about 6 months before launch that it would be mandatory for online PlayStation titles. I want to thank whoever did this time machine. Why on May 3rd did it say signing into the PlayStation Network optional when playing a PlayStation game? And then on May 4th, some PlayStation games may require you to sign in and link an account for PlayStation Network. Due to February launch, the CEO of Arrowhead said they knew 6 months ahead of time. That puts us in September 2023. Why are we updating the FAQ in May? See, this is where we get that negative relationship. Why are we flying by the seat of our pants here? You clearly weren't ready for this to happen. You weren't ready at launch because it was optional then. You weren't ready on May 3rd because you still had the old verbiage. So why does Sony suddenly expect everybody to love them? Because they reversed the decision. Was reversing the decision the right thing to do? Yes, absolutely. Because it wasn't a legitimate need. But this looks so bad for Sony. You literally were changing it ninja on the fly. It wasn't necessary. Back to Spitz. Now, I'm not trying to beat up Spitz, but Spitz is the community manager. It's an unsung hero position. They have to do a lot of talking. I was completely unaware how many countries didn't have the ability to make a PlayStation Network account when I made that statement. I deeply regret implying that it was so easy for everyone to just sign up and not worry about it. It's absolutely not our intention to force people to break Sony's terms of service or just not play the game if they're in a restricted region. There needs to be a better solution. Right. You need to spend more than 1% of your time thinking about the problem. You need to spend 51% of your time minimum thinking about the problem. Because the PlayStation Network is only available in 69 countries. 177 countries or territories, it is not. Therefore, basically overnight, you said, meh, all of you that bought the game, you're just not going to be able to play. Sony doubles down, removing Helldivers 2 from sale in 177 countries and territory that can't access the PlayStation Network, while Arrowhead's CEO says, I don't have the final say. This is another learning point. The developers don't have the final say. in some situations. The publishers don't have the final say in some situations. The contract has the final say. Now, what do I mean by that? If you remember ArcAge under Tryon Worlds, they were the publisher, XL Games was the developer, but XL Games strictly controlled what could be in the cash shop and at what prices. So in some cases, the publisher doesn't have the final say, the developer does. In this particular instance, Arrowhead doesn't have the final say, they're at the mercy of Sony. If a Sony account isn't required to play the game, isn't connected to Steam, it's very hard for Sony to track player accounts. Steam doesn't allow us to have any way to keep track of unique player IDs through our system, and since players on Steam can have duplicate usernames, if we get a report for a user named John, we have no idea which of the 450,000 players named John we're trying to ban. But if they have a unique Sony ID linked to their Steam account, we can tell exactly which John it is and ban them easily. This is a half-truth, because you have a Steam ID. Every single Steam account has a Steam ID. Numerous game developers that are in my community have all said, yes, you can identify somebody by their Steam ID. Other games I've played automatically pull your Steam account name into your game file, into your game client. So Helldivers 2's community manager is going to say the in-game purchases work. So a guy named John purchases credits to buy the armor. Now, I'm not having a discussion if Helldivers 2 is pay to win. My understanding is it is not. You can grind in-game or you can just pay to convenience. But your in-game purchases work, but your in-game moderation doesn't. But you know they have a Steam ID. So have you not been banning anybody since February? Because I haven't heard of rampant bad behavior. I haven't heard about people exploiting and not getting banned. I have heard bans have been given out. So how have they done the bans? I think this is another one of those, you're shooting from the hip. You didn't know about the PlayStation Network. You're a community manager. Now, I don't know what else Spitz does at the company, but you're saying that the Steam ID isn't a good enough thing for you to be able to moderate with, yet other games are able to do that. I think this is where you need to pump the brakes and stop talking, and that's the lesson learned, right? If you've already opened your mouth and put your foot in it, you've opened your mouth again and exchanged feet, verify what you're going to say before you say it. But it is what it is. Account linking plays a critical role in protecting our players and upholding the values of safety and security provided on PlayStation and PlayStation Studio games. This is our main way to protect players from griefing and abuse by enabling the banning of players that engage in that type of behavior. It also allows those players that have been banned the right to appeal. So again, nobody's been banned since February, or if somebody was banned in February, March, or April, they haven't had the ability to appeal. Or is this just what's convenient? Because it sounds like this is our main way. It sounds like this is what's easiest for Sony, for PlayStation, PlayStation Network, PlayStation Publishing, PlayStation PC. It sounds like that's what's most convenient for them, but it doesn't sound like that's the only viable way. I think the big thing that we've learned here is that when you accept poor service, you begin to expect poor service. There has been a great rift and a great divide growing in the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years between gamers and developers. Now, there are some really tremendous, phenomenal game developers out there that actually care about their communities. And then there are some really just terrible game studios out there that are being run by accountants who are making bad decisions for the game, but great decisions for the bottom line. This is what gamers need to realize. If we keep accepting these behaviors, then we should just expect them. Who dropped the ball with the PlayStation Network availability in only 69 countries? I'm very shocked by that. I am very shocked that they were getting ready to have to give refunds. Again, you changed it on May 3rd. When you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Where was the we're gonna tiger team this out, we're gonna think about it, what are our roadblocks, what are our obstacles, what are our possible hiccups? Could you imagine if we found out later that there was a guy in a room that said, hey, that the PlayStation Network's only available in 69 countries and we've sold this game in 177 locations where it's not available? Sony saw an opportunity to add millions of PlayStation Network accounts. That's my belief. And that could give them a bump in their stock price, because when they have to prepare their shareholder report, they could turn around and they could say, hey, in the second quarter of 2024, we added on 6.2 million PlayStation Network accounts. I would bet my top hat that's what drove this entire decision. Somebody saw an opportunity to really bump up the PlayStation Network accounts because they were looking for a financial payoff. Reality is they gave millions of players the opportunity to refund despite having hundreds of hours of played. As I said before, as I showed before, the average player goes down each month. Sure, there's a lot of old players leaving and a few new players coming in. We know that someone will play a game for 100 hours, 150 hours, 200 hours, and then they're done. They've played it, they've moved on. I don't know for shooter fans, and if somebody wants to leave me a comment, I don't know if there's been a new shooter that's come out. I don't know if there's been another game of that style come out recently, but seriously, people are going to divert. You sold 8 million copies, you made $320 million, but how much were you going to have to give in refunds? Right? How much of that was going to go to refunds now that 177 countries and territories players can't access their game? Now, we know that the Western world, the United States, Canada, Mexico, I feel like the Animaniacs song is about to start. And then, England, Ireland, Germany, France, Great Britain, all the countries that are in the PlayStation Network area, they're all going to keep playing. They're not going to be able to refund. Except, I back that up, I have heard of people getting refunds in Europe because the GDPR, and you can't mandate somebody give their personal information. So I do know a few people that use the opportunity to get their refund. And then I know the big question is going to be, why don't people just make a PlayStation Network account? Somebody posted this. I'm not linking my account to PlayStation Network. And in 2011, no, guys, I do want to be honest. This is 2011. This is 13 years ago. Hackers accessed personal data of 77 million PlayStation Network users, 25 million online entertainment customers stolen, Sony Pictures website hacked, exposing 1 million accounts. I mean, that's all 13 years ago. But I wish that was the end of it, but just last year, Sony investigates alleged hack. October 2023, Sony notifies employees of data breach. So as much as I'd like to say we can ignore this list because it's old, they just had 2 issues last year. Maybe Sony should recognize people don't trust them with their personal data. But the good news is, and this is the last talking point, PlayStation reverses decision for Helldivers 2 PlayStation Network account linking. This is where many content creators, bigger content creators than I will ever be, have said, we need to vote with our wallet. And I 100% agree. If we started voting with our wallet, game companies would take notice. Sony, I think, dodged a bullet. Sure, they gave some refunds. Steam is going to give some refunds. But now that the game is going to be available, the refunds will stop. The floodgates will close. I think this is a great opportunity for every game development company that wants to make a difference to be like Larian Studios and make good games, right? I said in another video, it's linked up there above, what happened to ArcAge. I said, make good games. I think making good games is the first step, but rekindling that relationship between your studio and the players is paramount. If game development studios can't do that, there's going to be the next Helldivers 2. Community management, and again, I didn't want to rake Spitz over the coals. I don't know him, never had a conversation with him, don't even know if him is a him. I don't have a dog in the fight. But that behavior is becoming far too familiar, far too repetitive, far too run-of-the-mill of how community managers are engaging with their community. Take a breath, walk away, drink a coffee, go to the boss, especially when the boss, the CEO, is saying, I'm to blame, and the community manager is saying, you're to blame. That's what needs to stop. I'd really love to hear some feedback from Helldivers 2 players. What do you think? And If you think there's another studio out there doing similar things, leave a comment about that as well. I hope you enjoyed the lo-fi in the background. It was in the upper right-hand corner. I'll put a link in the description. I'll see you guys next time.